السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الخالق المخلوقين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من عباده المؤمنين والمسلمين والصالحين قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. All praise is due to Allah, the creator of all creations. And all praise is due to Allah, who has made us from among His believers and among the Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us in the Quran, in fact it is an instruction, where He says, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, verily Allah and His angels send salutations upon the Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs us, O you who believe, send salutations and greetings upon the Messenger. So before I continue, let me share this advice, and hopefully I'll repeat the ayah again towards the end of the talk, and I will not be met with silence. This is the practice, the sunnah, that the creator of the universe is telling us that Allah sends salutations upon the Prophet ﷺ. And the Mala'ikat send salutations upon the Prophet ﷺ. And then he instructs us, O you who believe, those who have Iman in their heart, send salutations upon the Prophet ﷺ. It is clear to us, and I'm sure everybody in this masjid, brothers and sisters, that these are difficult times. These are times where there's massive upheavals. These are times of change. These are times of great tests for many people, many parts of the Ummah. If we go 1,400 years back into the past and we slowly travel forward, you will find that there were many leaders and rulers, kings, queens, people that held status, people that held power, people that called themselves emperor, people that called themselves Caesar. How many, when the name of a Caesar is heard today, send greetings on Caesar? How many people anywhere on earth, when they hear about the Emperor of Byzantine, acknowledge him? How many praise presidents and prime ministers that come and go? Yet, and this is a positive thing, this is one of those things which we as a community of believers can take heart in. Every single place on this planet where there is one believer, no matter whether it's the northern hemisphere, no matter whether it's the southern hemisphere, no matter on which latitude you sit, whether you are on the equator or you're in the Arctic, you will hear the praise of the Prophet ﷺ. You will hear somebody saying Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You will hear the name of the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the adhan. And you will find people that are looking at that example, at that exemplary, at the practices of a messenger that was sent for all of humanity and all of humankind. Just as the Quran is the divine word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the guidance will continue regardless of time and place. No, it is not just merely a historical document. It's not a book from history that sits on a shelf, although sadly many Muslims treat it like that. That awe and that wonder that raised our civilizations in the past to the peaks of science and technology and education, where the European nations were going to the Muslim world to study. That awe that people had for the Quran, that effort they put into studying it, into reading it, into learning from it, into seeking knowledge from it, into using it as a means of guidance in their daily lives, it's a bit rare, don't you think? It's a bit rare. And we as Muslims can ask ourselves that question. How much of that awe is in our own lives? How much of that awe and respect and glorification is spread around us? How much of our inspiration, our desire, our motivation to be the best that we can be comes from that Quran? And if it doesn't come from that Quran, brothers and sisters, that's a scary situation, because then we have to start asking ourselves, where does it come from? Where does it come from? Where does the ideas come from? Where does the identity come from? Where does that child, where does that teenager get the personality that they get? How do they conceive? How do they think? How do they bring themselves to picture in their minds what they want to be in 10 years and in 5 years? And when they graduate from school or when they graduate from college, where is that picture coming from? Where is that imagination? Who's informing that imagination? If it's not coming from the divine source, if it's not coming from the one whose praises are recited and mentioned and sung and echoed in the masajids all over the world. There's a hadith that the Prophet mentioned, and you find this hadith in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, hadith Sahih. I won't read out the whole hadith. I'll give you a summary in English. Hadith, inshallah, those that want to read it has been printed out. It should be on the board downstairs. It's a very important hadith. So I would suggest, I would recommend, make the time to read it a few times again. Don't just take my word for it. Go directly to the source and read it a few times and digest it and internalize the information in there. The hadith speaks about prophecy coming from the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he tells the companions, and as I say this, you can see it in the times that I was referring to, these difficult times, where the Prophet ﷺ tells the companions that soon the time will come where people will invite each other to come and partake of what is yours, to take your things. I'm simplifying it here. You can read the exact words, inshallah, afterwards. To take your things, to attack what you have, to take what you consider valuable, to absorb what you love. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling this to the companions. Now, as we know, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were, weaklings and ordinary men. These were great people. These were people that stood for their deen under all circumstances, under the most trying times. You can read in the history of the companions about the sacrifices of Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and the competition between himself and Hazrat Umar, who gave more, who made greater sacrifices. You can read about the sacrifices that Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu made. You can read all these things. But here these companions are concerned, they ask, once that were there, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, why would this situation be like that? Are we going to be so few? Will we be so little in number that people can just come and do whatever they want? So the Prophet ﷺ says, no, you will not be few in number. In fact, you'll be much greater in number than you are now. What was the amount of the companions at the Fath Makkah? 100,000? Some say. Some narrations. 100,000 companions entering into Makkah. When Makkah was opened and the Muslims returned and the Prophet ﷺ returned. How many Muslims are there in the world today? At least 1.5 billion Muslims. And if you go to some of these statistical information sites and research think tanks and so on, you'll see that non-Muslims even will admit this is the fastest growing religion in the world. 1/5 of the population will be Muslim by such and such a time. 2 billion people will be Muslim by such and such a time. It's predicted statistically. And it's not surprising when you see the amount of people embracing the deen. But look back at that hadith. We're talking about over 1 billion Muslims in the world today. North, south, west, east, over 1 billion. And yet we are seeing that. Now we come to the pragmatic aspects of this hadith. The practical parts. They asked the Prophet, why? The question. When they say, will we be so little? It's a why question. So the Prophet tells them, the awe and the fear will be removed from those that are opposing. Again, what is the cause of that? And the Prophet tells them there's two things. Hubb al-dunya, love of the world, and Qira'at al-maut, fear of death. These are consequences of a term that the Prophet mentions, a specific term that he uses, that the Sahaba didn't know. So he had to explain it by telling them, Hubb al-dunya and Qira'at al-maut is the cause of that. This term that the Prophet used was wahm. Right? For those that are Arabic speakers, if you go into classical Arabic dictionaries and you go and explore the term wahm, you'll find shades of weakness. And this is the beauty of classical Arabic. Many times English doesn't have a single word. You have to have a paragraph to explain the shades of meaning in one word that the Prophet mentioned. And this word wahan, what does it mean? It means weakness on the surface level. The Prophet's description of that weakness in the hadith was that you will be like debris. كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ, like the debris that floats on the water when there's a big storm. Like the flotsam and the jetsam that moves down the river. What is debris, my brothers and sisters? It's fragments, bits and pieces of things that once upon a time belonged to something whole that was meaningful. And now it's just meaningless fragments. The Ummah as a whole, when it has purpose and it has meaning, the Muslim, when he has purpose and he has meaning, and he knows what he's supposed to go out and do in his life, he knows that his deen does not end when we walk out of that door. He knows that his membership in Islam does not stop in between the times of Salah. He knows that his deen, his love for the Prophet ﷺ, and his attachment to the Quran does not begin and end with the few days of Ramadan. He knows that there's a greater purpose to his life. He's not distracted. Mark these words. He's not distracted by the Hubb al-dunya. He's not distracted. There is no harm in having the dunya. You can have it, you can have all of it and as much of it as you want. Where does the harm come in? When it is the dunya for the dunya's sake, and you're chasing it because you don't have a greater purpose, you're chasing it for the sake of the thing itself. And we all know the nature of things. They die, they break, they end. Anybody that has been purchasing appliances sequentially will know that it has a sell-by date designed in the product these days. You know, when they tell you the guarantee is 1 year, okay, mashallah, I have to make sure that I can pay for repairs after 1 year. Because something is going to break. And it's designed that way. And this is the situation with the material world. It has an end. It has an expiry date. Yet if we pursue it for its own sake, so that other people can look at us and say, mashallah, look what he has. And there's no mission and there's no greater purpose, we are no different from that piece of wood that broke off the apple tree and fell into the river and has lost its purpose now because apples don't grow on that branch anymore. It's just floating down the river. Ghutha is saying. In English, there's a saying, and then you would know it, so it's not something new. You go with the flow. But ask anybody that has ever sailed a ship. When there's no rudder, my brother, when there's no steering wheel, when you have nothing to guide it, you're in a very precarious situation. When you don't understand your deen, you don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you. You don't push your kids to find out what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. You don't know what the Messenger ﷺ has left as an example about how we should treat each other and what our character should be when we have business transactions and so on and so on and so on. You ignore all these things that inform you about your purpose in life. Then you're wide open to that disease of hubb dunya wa karahat al-maut. You're wide open to this concept of wahm. And I looked in English at different translations. Weakness doesn't give the full translation. Loss of energy doesn't give the full translation. It gives pieces of it. Lack of motivation doesn't give the full translation. What's the closest one? Apathy. The word in English for that, apathy. Someone who's lost their sense of purpose doesn't really care. It's not really bothered. Not really interested in doing anything about it. This is a term that you'll find even in medical healthcare. Ask a medical specialist, define apathy. They'll give you an interesting description about somebody that has lost their motivation and they have no more goals left. And they cannot act on those motivations, so they cannot achieve those goals, so they basically just sit back. And the Nabi Sallallahu gave us this beautiful description of what apathy looks like. The debris floating with the storm. The flotsam and jetsam. If you want to simplify it even more, the meaningless junk that floats down the river that nobody has any use for. Not even the person that needs to make a fire will take that wood and try to make a fire because it's wet. So the point here, my respected brothers and sisters, is two things. One, we have to be very careful of the sickness of apathy. And the sickness of apathy is informed by these distractions. And these distractions keep us so preoccupied that we make no time to understand what our purpose is. So what happens? We become a bunch of individuals, a loose club. We meet once in a while, we gather once in a while, we shake hands on each day, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? That's it. But there's no bonds of brotherhood. There's no bonds of love. There's no bonds of unity. There's no concern at the leadership level. And you can see that, unfortunately, in the world. We, especially, that live in countries where we are minorities, small percentage of the population, yet we have the freedom to do lots of things. We have the freedom to build our communities. We have the freedom to build our masajids. How much, I'll end this point with this question, how much of this opportunity are we actually using? Allah has given us this opportunity. How much are we actually using? And if you want an example how these opportunities can be used, look at the Christian neighbors here in Winston-Salem. Look at what they've done and what they've achieved. I haven't been in this country for that long. Brothers here with more experience, more knowledge, grew up here, you know a lot more than me. But in the short period of a year that I've been here, I've seen that the hospitals, Baptist, where is Baptist? How does Baptists get into a hospital. No, that's a church. Church people were behind the building of that private hospital. The universities, Wake Forest, Baptist. Who started the university? Church people. So curiosity drags you on. How many colleges and universities in the United States have started off by churches, by religious organizations? Actual universities and colleges, at least 700. 700, right? 700. How many does the Muslim community have? So without harping on that point, let me end the segment of the khutbah with that question. Khutbahs are not just discussions when you come in, relax, go out, that's the end of the story. It's supposed to make us think. We're supposed to take some information from that, go back, reflect on it. And if it does something to us, it changes something, it changes the neural pathways, it opens up some new ideas, then inshallah something has been gained. But if we went back, had a meal, forgot all about it, there's not much that happened then. نستغفر الله العظيم ونتوب إليه. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. آمين. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, collaborate with each other. Collaborate on goodness and piety. Collaborate in goodness and piety. Work together to achieve goodness. Work together to become more pious. Work together. Ta'awanu. This is an instruction. This is a methodology for us. How do we improve? How do we start moving in a direction that takes us away from the wahn, from the distractions, from the weakness? We need to collaborate. We need to work together. Everybody has different levels of expertise. Everybody has different levels of motivation. Everybody has different grades and quantities of resources. But if we work together, brothers and sisters, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely open the doors of His rahmah on us even greater than what it is now. And already there's so much rahmah all around us. Already there's so much rahmah. But more can come. More openings can come. More development can come. Our communities can develop at a much better rate, at a much more accelerated rate. We have so much intellectuals, so many professionals, so many artisans, so many skilled people. But somewhere along the line, someone forgot to tell them that, brothers and sisters, your deen does not only apply to your ritual practice. Your deen is not just about making salah. Your deen is what you do with that rizq that Allah has given you. That rizq of knowledge, that rizq of time, that rizq of strength that Allah has given you. And rizq in some form you have. And then the rest of the ayah. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Don't collaborate in sin. Don't collaborate in a manner that is creating animosity between people. There's opposition. Find common ground. People come from different cultures. MashaAllah, here you can see it. In the US, you can see it so clearly. People immigrate from so many different backgrounds, so many different countries. Yet they all have one thing in common. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. They all have it. And they have this bond. It's there, it's shining in their hearts. But they have to collaborate. There has to be ta'awun. You have to sit down. You have to speak. You have to find ways of doing good. Every age, every period is different. What worked in one place might not work in another place. But it's for the people of that place to gather, to look at what they can do and what they can achieve. And there is nothing stopping us, my respected brothers and sisters. Nothing. Except, go back to that hadith, apathy. When there's some call, the Imam is going to have a program. How many people pitch up? When there's some call, we're going to speak about what is Islam. How many people pitch up? When there's a school program starting on a Sunday, how many people send their kids? And then we look at the non-Muslims and say, oh, mashallah, these people are so good in sports. Why? Because they prepare to drive their kids day and night to this place, to that field, so that the child can play sports. Imagine that same level of dedication to a football game, to a volleyball game, for somebody that most likely will not make pro. That amount of time and that amount of dedication given to a kid's education. Imagine what the next generation of Muslims will look like. Their level of knowledge, their level of understanding. They won't just be professionals. They won't just be artisans. They won't just be consumers. They will be producers. Producers that know their deen, that can think about how we can produce so that we can improve everyone's lives. How we can do things so that we can help not just the Muslim community, but the whole community around us. So that everyone sees, you know what, we want to be like those people. Like the first traders that went to Indonesia from Yemen and Hadramaut and these places. There was no Muslims there. No army ever went to Indonesia, brothers and sisters. It was Muslim people that went to trade there. They went to do business. They went to go and seek their materialism on the islands in Southeast Asia. And today you have more Muslims in Indonesia than the entire Middle East put together. More Muslims. Even though it's not a part of the world that people speak about or know about much. But this is the quality of when you do things and your niyyah is there and you try to do things with goodness and collaborate with each other. So my respected brothers and sisters, I'm going to try to end with that because I know that the time is limited. But let me just remind again that the verse talks about ta'awun. And there's two kinds of ta'awun. The ta'awun of goodness and the ta'awun of moving. And when we make decisions and we have crossroads, two paths in front of us, ask ourselves and teach your kids and the young people that you have any influence on to look at it from that perspective. Is this going to lead me in a good direction? Is this going to lead me in a bad direction? And let us look in our hearts, let us look in our minds, let us call on whatever light of Iman that we have within us and try to get that motivation. Get the motivation that can deflect the apathy, that can redirect the apathy. So instead of being the flotsam and jetsam floating down the river, the sticks that have lost all purpose, the branches that have fallen in, that are now just getting washed away till they reach the ocean somewhere. Let us start producing boats, even though they may be small. Let us start doing something that is good, even though it may be small. But when you start working with some purpose, collaborating with each other with some purpose, even if you just start by sitting together over a cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is you drink and speaking about it, just to get the machine working, so that we can start thinking as Muslims in terms of production and not just remain the consumers for everybody to feed with whatever junk they want to feed us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberate the ummah of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wherever it is in a state of oppression. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide our minds and our hearts and our souls to move in the direction away from apathy, to be motivated to do good, to be motivated to perform our salah, to be motivated to support our communities, to be motivated to improve our communities, to be motivated at the very least to try and make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at least help our communities, at least help our children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, especially those that are parents, that will become parents, that have been parents, that are grandparents, that are related to the act of parenting in any form. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to be in some way or other an inspiration to the children around us, to the next generation, so that they may keep their identity and they may keep their deen. And they may keep their perspectives and they may keep their ability to think critically and to not fall prey to everybody's 2 cents and cheats and fake news and everything else that they try to sell to the communities, that they try to sell to the children. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر المسلمين في فلسطين وفي غزة وفي كل بلاد في العالم اللهم انصرهم اللهم انصرهم اللهم اخرجنا من الظلمات إلى النور. Oh Allah, lift us out of oppression and into the light. Oh Allah, lift us out of oppression and into the light. اللهم اخرجنا من الظلمات إلى النور. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولأستاذنا ولمشايخنا ولأصحابنا ولأحبائنا ولقبائلنا ولمشايخنا ولجميع أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. Let me do it again. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. I cannot hear the words echoing, my brothers. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. Brothers, there's a few announcements that I will just hand it here. There's a brothers' breakfast after Fajr tomorrow. And the car wash is on Saturday tomorrow at 10. And inshallah, we have a class every Sunday on engaging the Quran. That's at 2 o'clock on Sunday immediately after Dhuhr. And also one of the brothers just mentioned to me that there's a sister that requires some help. Please speak to brother back then, Khalil, inshallah, with regards to that.
Also, brother, I asked everybody to please make dua for Brother Rana and Brother Farouk. They are both in the hospital. That's all the information I have.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant those that are sick, shifa, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant those that are healthy, increase their health.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا